I don't care what your tickets say. The voice was sharp, metallic, slicing through the weary drone of Atlanta International Airport. Children like you don't belong in first class. At Gate B47, 10-year-old twins Marcus and Zoe Williams froze, the words striking them with the force of a physical blow. The woman behind the counter, her name tag reading Janet Rodriguez, held their boarding passes aloft as if they were contaminated. Her 15 years of service had worn the kindness from her face, leaving only a rigid mask of authority. As she spoke, a security chief, Dave Patterson, began to move toward them, his presence a heavy shadow that made even seasoned travelers look away. Marcus, a junior aviator pin gleaming on his shirt from a summer camp dream, instinctively tried to shield his sister. Zoe's only defense was to clutch her stuffed elephant, Peanut, so tightly her knuckles shone white against its worn gray fabric. The low hum of the crowded gate area faltered and died. Nearly 200 passengers turned to watch. A constellation of small screens lit up as phones were raised to record the unfolding drama. But amid the silent, horrified stares, a more insidious sound began to ripple through the crowd, whispers of approval. "Finally, someone's doing something," a man muttered. "Probably stole them," another agreed. The ugly truth hung in the air. For some, the gate agent's cruelty was not an outrage, but a validation. "Where did you get these tickets?" Janet demanded, waving the boarding passes for seats 2A and 2B. They weren't stolen. They were a gift of love from their father, Dr. Michael Williams, a desperate attempt to stitch some light back into a world that had gone dark 6 months before. That was when a rainy Tuesday and a drunk driver had stolen their mother, Angela, leaving a void that felt as vast and empty as the sky. This trip to Miami, for their grandmother's 80th birthday, was meant to be a new beginning. A first solo flight, a first-class adventure. Their father had wanted them to be comfortable, to be cared for, to believe that kindness still existed. But Janet Rodriguez operated from a different worldview, one soured by personal disappointments and curdled into a bitter form of righteousness. In her mind, she wasn't being cruel. She was a guardian of standards, a gatekeeper for a world she felt was slipping away. And in that world, 2 young black children in first class were an anomaly, a disruption to the established order she was sworn to protect. The atmosphere in the terminal was already a powder keg. Outside, thunderstorms rolled across the southeast, grounding flights and fraying nerves. Gate B47 was a pressure cooker of weary travelers. It was into this charged environment that Monica Sterling, a flight attendant who wore her uniform like a suit of armor, glided over to Janet's side. She leaned in, her whisper a drop of venom. "First class should be exclusive," she murmured, her meaning as clear as the polished buttons on her blazer. Together, with Dave Patterson's looming presence, they formed an impenetrable wall of authority, willing to let the cabin's empty first-class seats fly vacant rather than admit these 2 children. The storm clouds gathering outside the airport were nothing compared to the one about to break inside Terminal B. Marcus, ever the polite young man his father had raised, answered respectfully, "Our dad bought them for us, ma'am." Zoe, her excitement dimming under the harsh glare, added with a hopeful smile, "It's our first time flying alone. We're twins." Janet's response was to announce, loud enough for the sea of phones to capture, "I'm going to need to verify these aren't stolen." The words landed with a sickening thud. Stolen? The humiliation was a slow-burning fire. As Janet made a performative call to her supervisor, Zoe's composure finally broke. The tears she had been fighting began to trace silent paths down her cheeks, the magic of the trip crumbling into confusion and fear. Why were they being so mean? "It's okay, Zoe," Marcus whispered, putting an arm around her. "Daddy will fix this." He possessed an unshakable faith in his father. He just had to reach him. "Can we please call our dad?" Marcus asked, his voice steady. "He can explain everything." Dave Patterson stepped forward, crossing his arms. "No phone calls until we sort this out." The twins were escorted to a set of cold, plastic chairs near the gate, a walk of shame under the gaze of the entire terminal. As they sat, isolated and scared, Zoe whispered, "Remember what Daddy always says? About staying together?" Marcus nodded, his jaw set. Twins stick together, no matter what. While the twins drew strength from each other, the passengers remained a fractured audience. A businesswoman with her own first-class ticket shifted uncomfortably, her silence a form of consent. A middle school teacher recognized the familiar shape of bullying but was paralyzed by the uniformed authority before him. But then there was Maria Gonzalez, a mother of 3, who saw in Zoe's tear-streaked face the reflection of her own children. Her maternal instinct, a force more powerful than any airport security chief, finally broke through the paralysis of the crowd. She had been filming, her phone a silent witness. But witnessing was no longer enough. To understand the power quietly coiled within these 2 children, you had to understand the man who raised them. After losing Angela, Michael Williams had thrown himself into his work, a demanding, high-stakes job that few people truly understood. No matter how many hours he worked, his twins remained his true north, the center of his universe. They were all he had left of Angela, and he would have torn down the sky to protect them. As Marcus sat in that plastic chair, he looked past the gate and out the massive terminal windows. His gaze sharpened. He, with his pilot dreams and stacks of aviation magazines, noticed something the adults had missed. The planes weren't just delayed, they were stationary, lifeless on the tarmac. A strange and unnatural stillness had fallen over one of the world's busiest airports. Zoe, who could read his thoughts in the subtle shift of his expression, whispered, "You're thinking about Daddy's work, aren't you?" He nodded slowly. A desperate idea, a terrifying possibility began to form in his mind. 6 months earlier, he'd tried to explain his father's job to his class. "My dad controls the airplanes," he'd said, only to be met with laughter and accusations of lying. He had learned then to keep his father's secret. But now, as the gate agent and her supervisor discussed calling Child Protective Services, as Zoe clung to him whispering, "They can't take us away from Daddy, can they?" Marcus realized their secret might be the only thing that could save them. He understood something that Janet, Dave, and Monica could never imagine. The perfect storm wasn't just delaying flights, it was being orchestrated, and the man at the center of it all had no idea the storm had already found his children. As a mother of 3, she knew the geography of fear in a child's eyes. She couldn't just stand by and document injustice. She had to act. Walking with purpose to Janet Rodriguez's desk, Maria planted herself firmly before the gate agent and declared, her voice carrying across the waiting area, "This is wrong, and you know it. They're just babies." Janet's face flushed a deep crimson at being challenged so publicly. "Ma'am, I need you to step back. This is airline business." But Maria was a fortress. She had raised 3 children and battled bureaucrats who had tried to dismiss her family's needs. "This is human decency business," she shot back. "These children have done nothing wrong, and you're treating them like criminals. Look at them. They're terrified." Her courage seemed to unlock something in the other passengers. Sarah Chen, a businesswoman who had been observing from the first-class lounge, finally found her voice. She remembered the sting of discrimination as a young Asian American girl and the promise she'd made to herself. If she ever had the power to stand up for others, she would use it. Sarah rose and strode over with the practiced confidence of someone who commanded boardrooms. "I've seen their tickets," she announced, her voice clear and unwavering. "They're legitimate first-class tickets. I was sitting right there when they presented them. There is nothing suspicious about those children except the color of their skin." The accusation hung in the air like a thunderclap. Sarah had said what everyone was thinking, but no one had dared to voice. Robert Thompson, a middle school teacher, could no longer stay silent. In his 20 years of education, he'd seen countless children misjudged and mistreated. Marcus and Zoe reminded him of the very reason he became a teacher. "I'm an educator," he said, his tone layered with professional authority. "I've been watching these kids for the past hour. They're scared, they're well-behaved, and they're good kids. What you're doing to them isn't just wrong, it's damaging. You're traumatizing children for no reason." But instead of retreating, Janet Rodriguez dug in her heels. The public challenge only hardened her resolve. "I'm protecting this airline's reputation," she declared, her voice rising. "We have standards to maintain, and I won't apologize for doing my job. I've been with this airline for 15 years, and I know what belongs in first class and what doesn't." Her words laid everything bare. This wasn't about security. This was about Janet's personal conviction of who belonged and who did not. While the adults argued, Marcus and Zoe were devising their own strategy. They had been listening intently to every overhead announcement when they heard it, a broadcast that changed everything. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are continuing to experience delays due to air traffic control issues. All departures are currently on hold pending clearance from the control tower. Marcus's head snapped up. Zoe, he whispered urgently, did you hear that? About the air traffic control? She whispered back. He nodded, his mind racing. Remember Dad said he had to work this weekend because of the storms? I think Dad might be working today. Zoe's eyes widened with understanding. Should we tell them? Marcus scanned the chaos. Not yet. They won't believe us. Remember what happened at school? He was referring to the time other kids had laughed at him for saying his father controlled airplanes. But maybe we can show them instead. The twins shared a look, a silent communication perfected over 10 years. They had a plan. The pressure from the growing crowd was becoming too much for Tom Bradley to ignore. More passengers were speaking up, phones were recording everything, and the situation was spiraling into a public relations nightmare. Fine, Tom finally conceded. They can make one phone call, one call to verify their story, and then we proceed according to protocol. The twins looked at each other, and for the first time in an hour, a flicker of hope ignited in their eyes. Who should call Dad? Marcus asked his sister. Zoe reached for the phone, but Marcus gently stopped her. You talk to him first, he said softly. He always smiles when he hears your voice. Right now, I think Dad needs to smile before he hears what happened to us. With trembling fingers, Zoe dialed the number she knew by heart. The phone rang twice before a familiar voice answered. Hey, Princess, Dr. Michael Williams said, the smile audible in his tone. Aren't you supposed to be on the plane with Marcus right now? Did you miss your flight? The sound of her father's voice shattered Zoe's composure. Her own voice broke as she tried to explain. Daddy, they won't let us on the plane. They say our tickets are fake and they want to call child services. Marcus tried to tell them, but they won't listen. I'm scared, Daddy. I'm really scared. The change in Dr. Williams' voice was immediate and absolute. The warmth evaporated, replaced by something cold and dangerous. What? Zoe, slow down. Tell me exactly what's happening. Where's Marcus? I'm here, Dad, Marcus said, taking the phone. With a clarity that defied his years, he recounted everything. Janet's accusations, the holding area, the threats, the passengers filming their humiliation. Put the supervisor on the phone, Dr. Williams commanded, his voice carrying an unshakable authority. Right now. Tom Bradley took the phone with the weary confidence of someone who dealt with upset parents for a living. He had no idea he was about to have the most important conversation of his career. This is Tom Bradley, gate supervisor for Flight 447, he said professionally. And you are? This is Dr. Michael Williams, came the reply, each word measured and precise. You're detaining my children. Tom's training kicked in. Sir, we're just following standard protocol with unaccompanied minors. There were some questions about ticket validity. My twins have never been separated in their entire lives, Dr. Williams said, his voice growing colder. They lost their mother 6 months ago, and now you are traumatizing them further. What is your full name and employee identification number? Something in the man's tone set Tom on edge. This wasn't a typical angry parent. This was someone accustomed to being in charge. I'm Tom Bradley, employee ID 7749. Sir, if you could just help us verify the ticket purchase. Who purchased those tickets? Dr. Williams asked, slicing through the corporate script. Tom checked his screen. According to our records, they were purchased by a Dr. Michael Williams. That would be me, Dr. Williams said with a dangerous calm. Now, Mr. Bradley, what authority do you have to detain my children? Tom was sweating now. Sir, we're just being cautious. First-class tickets, unaccompanied minors. Mr. Bradley, Dr. Williams interrupted, what do you do for a living? The question threw Tom completely. I'm a gate supervisor for the airline. And where do you work? At Atlanta International Airport. Do you know how Atlanta International Airport operates, Mr. Bradley? Do you understand the systems that keep it running? Tom was lost. I'm not sure what you're asking, sir. The twins watched, a shared excitement building between them. They saw Tom's confusion, his rising nervousness, the dawning horror that he was dealing with someone far more powerful than he could have imagined. Marcus squeezed Zoe's hand 3 times. Everything is going to be okay. Zoe squeezed back 4. I trust you. They knew what was coming. They had seen their father's authority before, but never wielded to protect them like this. Dr. Michael Williams was about to reveal his identity, and when he did, everyone in that terminal would understand the magnitude of their mistake. The moment of truth had arrived. His voice cut through the phone line with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel, and what he said next would change everything. "Mr. Bradley," Dr. Williams said, his voice deadly calm, "I am the Chief Air Traffic Controller for the Southeast region." The word struck Tom Bradley like a physical blow. His face drained of color, going from confused to ghost white in an instant. The phone in his hand suddenly felt as if it weighed 1,000 pounds. Chief Air Traffic Controller. The implications crashed over him in a tidal wave. "Every plane you see sitting on that tarmac," Dr. Williams continued, his voice swelling with authority, "every aircraft awaiting clearance, every flight that's been delayed for the past 2 hours, I control their movements." Janet Rodriguez, standing close enough to overhear, felt her knees go weak. The blood drained from her face as she grasped the catastrophic scale of what she had done. They hadn't just mistreated 2 children. They had detained the children of the man who held the entire airport in the palm of his hand. Marcus and Zoe shared one of their special looks. Despite everything, Marcus couldn't help a small, knowing smile. "Told you they wouldn't believe us," he whispered. Zoe nodded, her fear finally transmuting into pride. Dr. Williams wasn't finished. His voice took on the tone he used in the control tower during an emergency. Calm, absolute, and non-negotiable. "Mr. Bradley, you have 30 seconds to put my twins on that plane." Tom's corporate training fought for control even as his hands shook. "Sir, let's discuss this reasonably. I'm sure we can work something out." 25 seconds, Dr. Williams interrupted, "or I ground every flight in this airport." The threat was not an empty one. 20 miles away, in the air traffic control tower overlooking Hartsfield-Jackson, Dr. Michael Williams sat at his station, surrounded by radar screens. His colleagues saw the change in his demeanor, the hard set of his jaw, the cold fury in his eyes that signaled a grave error had been made. Back at Gate B47, the twins were no longer scared, helpless children. They stood together, hand in hand, their postures straightened by a quiet dignity. 20 seconds, Dr. Williams announced. Tom Bradley looked around desperately, at the crowd, the recording phones, at Janet, who looked ready to faint. "Sir, please, let's not do anything hasty." 15 seconds. The countdown felt like a death sentence. 10 seconds. Tom made one last desperate attempt. "Dr. Williams, surely we can..." 5 seconds. And then, Dr. Michael Williams did exactly what he had promised. "This is Control Tower," his voice echoed through the radio systems of Atlanta International. "Implement ground stop protocol immediately. All aircraft movements are suspended until further notice." The effect was instantaneous and devastating. Every single plane at the airport, on the runways, at the gates, taxiing for takeoff, came to a complete stop. Ground crews froze. Baggage handlers stopped loading luggage. Fuel trucks pulled to the side. Within seconds, the airport's PA system crackled to life, sending a shockwave through every terminal. "Ladies and gentlemen, all flights are temporarily suspended due to an air traffic control directive. Please remain calm and await further instructions." Chaos erupted. Passengers leaped to their feet demanding answers. Travelers panicked over missed connections and ruined plans. But at Gate B47, Marcus and Zoe Williams looked at each other with something approaching awe. "Daddy really did it," Zoe whispered. Marcus nodded, his chest swelling with pride. "I told you Dad was important." They watched as the reality of the situation crashed down on everyone around them. Tom Bradley stared at his phone as if it were a venomous snake. Janet Rodriguez was backing away from her desk, her face a mask of horror, realizing her career was over. The passengers who had been recording were now frantically calling news stations. Within minutes, airport management descended on the gate. Sandra Hayes, the airport director, a formidable woman with 20 years of experience, arrived with a team of supervisors and legal counsel. She had never seen anything like this. Janet tried desperately to explain. "We were just being cautious," she stammered. "Following protocol. We had no way of knowing." Sandra Hayes cut her off with a look that could melt steel. "You have just cost this airport millions of dollars over 2 10-year-olds," she said, her voice tight with fury. "Every minute this airport is shut down costs hundreds of thousands of dollars. And it's all because you decided 2 children with legitimate tickets didn't belong in first class." The financial fallout was staggering. But none of it mattered to Marcus and Zoe when they saw their father striding through the terminal toward them. Dr. Michael Williams had left his post, something he never did, the moment he knew his children were in trouble. The twins broke away and ran to him, their faces alight with relief. "Daddy!" they cried, throwing themselves into his arms. He caught them in a fierce embrace, holding them as if he would never let them go. For a moment, the powerful man who controlled the skies was just a father, making sure his babies were safe. "Are you okay?" he asked urgently. "Did anyone hurt you?" The words tumbled out of them in a rush. "They said our tickets were fake," Zoe said. "They wouldn't let us call you," Marcus added. The gate lady was so mean. Dr. Williams listened, his jaw tightening with every detail. Someone had made his children cry, had made them feel afraid and unwanted. That was unacceptable. As the twins continued their story, everyone watching began to understand. The man hugging those children had just shut down one of the busiest airports in the world with a single command. He had used his immense power without hesitation to protect his family. The confrontation was far from over, but the balance of power had shifted completely. The twins were no longer victims. They were the children of the most important person in that airport, and everyone was about to learn exactly what that meant. The aftermath at Gate B47 was swift and merciless. Airport Director Sandra Hayes wasted no time in delivering justice. Janet Rodriguez, the gate agent who ignited the nightmare, was terminated immediately. Her 15 years of service meant nothing against the millions in damages her prejudice had caused. As security escorted her away, she made one last desperate plea. "I was just doing my job." Sandra's response was ice cold. "Your job was to help passengers, not profile children. You're done here." Janet's badge was confiscated, her career in aviation over forever. Dave Patterson, the security chief who had threatened to call child services, was suspended pending a full investigation. His history of passenger complaints suddenly became highly relevant. "Mr. Patterson," Sandra informed him, reviewing his file, "you've had 17 formal complaints filed against you in the past 3 years. We kept you on because you claimed you were being thorough with security. But today, we see what your version of thoroughness really looks like. It looks like a multi-million-dollar disaster. In this security environment, you can't be too careful." "Those kids," Sandra replied, her voice cutting through the excuse like glass, "were 10-year-old twins with valid tickets traveling to see their grandmother. Your caution traumatized 2 children who have already lost their mother. It's clear your days of intimidating travelers are numbered." Tom Bradley, the supervisor who had blindly backed Janet's decisions and fanned the flames of the incident, was about to face his own reckoning. 15 years of climbing the corporate ladder were about to end in a free fall. Sandra summoned him to her office for what would be the most searing conversation of his career. The air was cold, the silence heavy. "Tom, you had multiple opportunities to defuse this," Sandra began, her eyes fixed on the timeline of events on her screen. "When Maria Gonzalez first complained, you could have investigated. When Sarah Chen vouched for the tickets, you could have listened. When Robert Thompson, a 20-year educator, told you these were good kids, you could have reconsidered. Instead, you chose to double down on discrimination." Tom shifted in his seat, his confidence evaporating. "I was supporting my employee. It's what good managers do." "Good managers," Sandra countered, her voice dangerously quiet, "support employees when they are right and correct them when they are wrong. You supported Janet Rodriguez when she was demonstrably, publicly wrong, even as multiple witnesses told you so. That isn't management, Tom. That's enabling prejudice." The consequences were swift and severe. Tom Bradley was immediately demoted from gate supervisor to general airport staff, a fall from grace that would have him cleaning terminals and directing lost tourists. His salary was cut by 40%, his benefits slashed, and any hope of future advancement within the company was extinguished. Monica Sterling, the flight attendant whose whispered poison about maintaining standards had emboldened Janet, received a formal career-staining reprimand. Her dreams of working international first-class routes, of serving celebrities and dignitaries, vanished before they ever had a chance to take flight. "Ms. Sterling," Sandra said during her own disciplinary meeting, "you actively encourage discrimination against children. Your comment about standards revealed precisely what kind of person you are and what you believe those standards are based on. You will be working domestic economy routes for the foreseeable future, and you will be attending every single sensitivity training session we offer." But the true test of leadership came when Sandra Hayes approached Dr. Williams and his twins. This was a woman who had navigated the egos of politicians and the demands of movie stars, a veteran of diplomatic incidents and security crises. Yet standing before this father and his two children, she had never felt more nervous about an apology in her life. The man before her wasn't just a passenger. He commanded the very airspace above her airport. He held the power to ground every flight in the Southeast with a single radio call, costing the industry millions and creating headlines that would haunt the airport for years. But more importantly, he was a father whose children had been deeply wounded on her watch. "Dr. Williams," Sandra began, her voice thick with genuine remorse, "I cannot begin to express how profoundly sorry I am for what happened to Marcus and Zoe today. There is absolutely no excuse for the treatment your children received. As the person responsible for ensuring every passenger feels safe and welcome here, I have failed your family completely." She then knelt, bringing herself to eye level with the twins. Her voice softened. "Marcus, Zoe, I am so sorry that the adults who should have protected you made you feel scared and unwelcome instead. What happened to you was wrong. It was unfair, and I promise you, with everything I have, it will never happen again at this airport." Marcus and Zoe looked at this powerful woman apologizing to them with such sincerity, and for the first time in hours, they felt seen. After being treated like criminals, it was a relief to hear a grown-up finally admit that they had been wronged. Sandra's apology was backed by immediate action. "Dr. Williams, I'm offering your family first-class upgrades for life on any flight through Atlanta International. This isn't just compensation, it's a commitment that your family will always be treated with the dignity you deserve." But she knew a gesture to one family wasn't enough. "Furthermore, we are implementing mandatory sensitivity training for every single employee at this airport. Gate agents, security, maintenance, everyone. No one who works here will ever again be able to claim they didn't know better." She turned back to the twins, a small, genuine smile touching her lips. "And Marcus and Zoe, we are going to create special twin seats on every flight so you can always sit together. We learned today that twins stick together, and that's a beautiful thing that should be celebrated, not separated." Dr. Williams accepted her apology with grace, but he recognized this moment was bigger than his family. Standing in the crowded gate area, with passengers, employees, and news crews watching, he had a chance to turn a painful experience into a meaningful lesson. "I appreciate your apology, Ms. Hayes, and I believe it's sincere," he said, his voice clear and steady. "But I want everyone here to understand something. This isn't just about my children. This is about every child who travels, every family who deserves to be treated with respect, every person who should be judged on their character, not their appearance." With his twins standing proudly at his side, Dr. Williams addressed the assembled crowd. "My children were judged today by the color of their skin," he declared, his voice carrying the calm authority of someone used to being obeyed. "They were treated as suspicious, as unworthy, as less deserving of basic human decency simply because of how they look." He placed a hand on each of his children's shoulders. "These are good kids. They get good grades, they help their neighbors. They lost their mother 6 months ago and were traveling alone for the first time to visit the grandmother who helped raise me. They were excited, they were polite, and they had legitimate tickets. But none of that mattered, because someone looked at them and made an assumption." His words resonated deeply with the onlookers, especially with the passengers of color who had known the sting of similar prejudice. Every child deserves to feel safe. Every child deserves to have adults protect them, not profile them. Marcus, still holding his father's hand, spoke up, his young voice carrying an unexpected wisdom. "We're just kids who wanted to see our grandma," he said simply. "We didn't do anything wrong." Zoe nodded, adding with the pure honesty only a child possesses. "And we're twins. We stick together no matter what. That's what twins do." The terminal erupted in applause, spontaneous and heartfelt. Maria Gonzalez, Sarah Chen, and Robert Thompson, the strangers who had become their allies, clapped the loudest. An elderly black woman called out. Those babies handled themselves with more dignity than the adults who mistreated them, igniting another wave of agreement. A young father holding his own daughter stepped forward, his voice thick with emotion. My little girl is watching this. She needs to see that people will still stand up for what's right. What began as an ugly act of discrimination had transformed into a powerful, teachable moment about justice and courage. Finally, after a 2-hour nightmare, Marcus and Zoe Williams boarded their flight to Miami. They walked down the jet bridge hand in hand, no longer the scared children from before, but two dignified young people who had learned the power of their own worth. As they settled into seats 2A and 2B, the first-class crew made sure they felt not just welcome, but celebrated. The captain himself came back to greet them, and for the first time all day, Marcus and Zoe felt the pure excitement of flying. The flight was smooth and uneventful. 3 hours later, their plane touched down in Miami, where their grandmother was waiting with arms outstretched. At 80 years old, Grandma Williams had lived through the civil rights era. She had ridden in the back of buses and fought for a seat at whites-only lunch counters. Seeing her grandchildren walk off that plane with their heads held high, having faced down injustice, filled her heart with a fierce pride. My beautiful twins, she said, pulling them into a deep embrace. Tell me everything. And they did. They told her about the mean gate agent, the scary supervisor, and the kind strangers who stood up for them. They told her about their father, who stopped an airport just for them. Later that evening, in her cozy living room, Grandma Williams pulled out an old photo album. You know, she said softly, what you did today. It reminds me of when your granddaddy and I integrated the department store lunch counter. People said we didn't belong there either, but we knew our worth. She pointed to a faded black and white photograph. Change doesn't happen all at once, babies. It happens one person at a time, one family at a time, standing up and saying, this is wrong. What you and your daddy did today, that's how the world gets better. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to like, subscribe, and share it with others. We'll see you in our next video.